Nigeria's oil sector maybe entering a new phase of growth, with the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited unveiling the new crude grade as Cawthon blend and successfully exporting its first cargo of about 950,000 barrels to the Netherlands. This marks the first crude export from a newly developed terminal in nearly 50 years, powered by the FSO Cawthon vessel, and signals a broader push to expand production capacity, improve infrastructure, and boost revenue in the upstream sector. But beyond the headline milestone, the key question is whether this translates into sustained output growth, stronger FX inflows, and real structural improvement in Nigeria's economy. Joining me now to unpack this, Mr. Jide Pratt, the country manager, Trade Grid, Chief Operating Officer, Iona, and an oil and gas professional, joining me right here in the studio. It's great to have you, sir.
Thanks,
happy post-Easter and everything else, in between, and de-escalation today. Hopefully no escalation.
Hopefully.
In a few minutes in the oil and gas industry. But first off, let's kick off with what played out this morning. We got de-escalation as expected. Oil prices, boom, below $100 per barrel. Is it time to celebrate?
So no. In every situation of war or chaos, there's normally a calm, and then there's a storm. So we've experienced a lot of storm for quite a while. I would use the word that reasoning seems to be taking the front stage now. So there's a 2-week window. And in this 2-week window, the first thing that you realize is, like you said, prices will start to dip. And that is happening because traders who have paper are going to let their paper go. So why are you holding on to stock when there's some relative calm for 14 days? That said, is it something we should be happy about? At the moment, yes. So let's take the win. What I'm still worried about is how sustainable is this win going forward. Sadly, on the side of the US, I'm not so sure that there's been a lot of good wind energy. It seems to be that the president, POTUS, has just taken a step and decides this is how we're going, regardless of how it affects anybody. If that calm continues, then we can get to some relative stability. Then, like you said, we can begin to celebrate and say the worst is behind us. That's how I'll put it.
And talking about celebrations now, 950,000 barrels of Cawthon exported to the Netherlands. The oil type, it's light, it's sweet. At this point, what's this milestone, for us?
A major win. So when you look at it, that as a country, we know that potentially we can do 2.5 million barrels a day. We haven't been anywhere near that in quite a while. If you look at the last set of OPEC reports, even though there was a blip at the time where we got to 1.8, we seem to be hovering around 1.4, 1.5. 950,000 barrels of this grade of crude oil is, and again, it's sweet like crude. The API gravity, like Bonny Light, because the API gravity is about 36.4, if my memory serves me right. So 2 things on that end. It means that if we're able to export it, rig counts are getting higher. If rig counts are getting higher and production is getting higher, it now means that on a balance of play, as a nation, there's more revenue from crude oil in terms of export. But it also means that at this time, we need to sit down and look at it. How do we also feed effectively and efficiently refineries that are local? The balance of this play has to be, as we get more crude oil, as we begin to export in terms of revenue, we must also begin to continue to refine, because like it or not, we've become a refining hub, as the case may be with the super refinery.
Because when I saw the headline, in my mind, I'm like, okay, Dangote refinery and other refineries, they need feedstock. At this point, and sending out 950,000 barrels to the Netherlands at a time like this, it just seems counterproductive-ish.
Valid point. So look at it this way. If there's a strain on revenue, then it means that they will sell down 950 to shore up fiscal or federation account. That's a 1. I do agree with you in terms of, which is why I said if this happens sustainably, don't forget that in 2024 and 2025, the NNPC released 2 different crudes. I believe it was Obodo, and then there was another one, Otapate. So they've done this since 2024, 2025, and now. So what needs to happen is that those figures need to become sustainable, not flash in the pans. And again, I had said this earlier, it means that we must balance what is going out as export for federation account and what is being retained, because it doesn't make sense if you have refining capacity of 650,000 barrels plus X, you can't feed the refineries efficiently, and then we're making so much money, quote and unquote, on export. What needs to happen is that balance where, you remember there was something called the domestic crude supply obligation. It hasn't died. That was one of the reasons that the government in place came on with the Naira for crude. So the question is this: if we're seeing increment, there must be a coefficient where if X amount is going as export, so and so amount is retained and fed into the local refineries. And that way you find a refining capacity, while on distillate, as a nation, the refineries make money. In terms of supply or security, it's guaranteed. In terms of timing, it's also outside export channels at that pace. I think that balance must be struck.
Right.
It must be struck.
So at this point, that's good for revenue.
Yes.
But also there should be balance, for feedstock and all of that. So with this new development, we did hear that Bonny Light hit about $120 per barrel, but I'm sure with this drop,
come down a bit.
We'll see a drop. So with all that's played out so far in an oil market with these grades, what do you think should be the next point of action for this government and the managers of this resource? Because with these high prices, we're not hearing much celebration about government revenue. It seems that's been, instead we're hearing more of, we have to pay more at the pumps.
It's a bit of a worry, and again, it comes to adequate planning. So the first cardinal point is that there's a direct correlation between crude oil pricing and distillate pricing. That's a fact. Now, the second thing is this. If we begin to earn in excess, so what was the benchmark for crude oil at the budget? It was $65 a barrel. If we're getting to levels of 110, like the 120, then whether we want to accept it or not, one thing that is happening is that federation revenue is increasing. Now, the accountability around it is what needs to be demanded at that time. Because the point is this: if you make 100% of what you had budgeted, that money has come into the coffers. So it means that, and don't forget, we're not saying federal government account, we're saying federation account. So it means that the states, the local government, and the center are, in terms of earning, they're earning more money. The flip side and the painful part is that, like, when we go to the pump, because there's a direct correlation between crude oil and distillate prices, we're paying more at the pump. So the question I've asked in this period, and I mean government policy, maybe subsidy is not the word to come back to. But Ladi, if there's an open market selling price for crude oil, and then there's a premium, we now need to discount that premium to feed into domestic crude supply obligation. And it's very, very simple, so that we can cap prices at a certain level. So that way, while we're gaining in excess in terms of revenue, some of it comes back as a palliative in terms of road transportation. The alternative would have been to say, let's just move to CNG, let's move to EVs. But we're not there yet. It's a road to get there. So in the interim, if this insanity around Iran continues, then I think we need to be looking at what the federation account is getting. And how do we dovetail some of it back as a discount on open market selling price to feed local refineries.
We did see measures from some other countries,
yes,
cutting off tax and
levies
on some of these refined products. What can we do there?
I'm going back to what I've said, and this is what I think works for Nigeria. Most of these countries do not produce crude. So if you look at what has happened in places like Kenya, Kenya has reduced levies and taxes, but they're not a large crude producer. So go back to our own competitive advantage. We are a large crude producer. So as against taking taxes and levies off, yes, those could be palliatives. I think the real meat of the issue here is that if we're earning $60 extra, take a knife and cut it across. What goes into government federation account? What goes back as a discount in terms of crude supply to local refineries? Because that way, once you discount the crude, I mean the ex-refinery or the ex-gate price is also going to be discounted. Give the crude that is required to who is required to, and begin to peg it. So if we say our daily use of petrol is 50 million, then peg it. So ex-refinery, ex-gate, if it is 50 million liters, then put it into vessels across hubs. The refinery brings it out, but I mean, instead of trucking it across the whole nation, send it into vessels. There are people who import it, there are people who export, and take it to hubs, regional hubs, Warri, Port Harcourt, Calabar. That's where the distribution of that product is felt instantly. It's not rocket science. The guys in power really know what to do, whether they want to do it.
And we're seeing this big drop, 15% drop, in prices in the global market, expecting Dangote refinery to drop.
What has happened over the last period of 2-3 months, you find out that they've been very, very not proactive, reactive. Immediately the market moves, they cut prices. So what you find out is that because we don't have a pricing window system, prices change on the day. Ladi, what should happen ideally is that every time crude oil prices go up or down, your batch is what we need to look at. When did you receive this crude? When did you refine this crude? So if you had stock in tank and your payments are deferred for 30 days, then what it means is that you should be applying the payments at the pumps or at X-gate based on what you refine backwards, not forward. But what the refinery seems to be doing is just anticipating on the jump. And every time there's a jump, they increase. So I assume that in this stage now, they should come back a bit and say that, okay, if this thing has dropped, because they've been very fast on the increase. I think that same proactivity needs to go into the decrease.
Right. We need to see that same energy.
I think so.
Prices don't stay sticky. Oppo, thank you so much. Mr. Jide Pratt, Country Manager, Trade Grid, and also an oil and gas professional. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. And definitely we hope de-escalation continues.
Thank you. Thank you, Ladi.